The galaxy was old, its stars burning with the light of civilizations that had existed for thousands of years. Among them, the Vashkor ruled with absolute control, their empires stretching across countless systems. They had risen to power through war, crushing every species that opposed them. To the rest of the galaxy, resistance was a forgotten idea. The weak submitted and the strong ruled. It had always been this way. No one expected anything to change. But then, something strange happened. A signal, faint at first, was detected from the far reaches of space. It was different from any known civilization, carrying patterns and codes that had never been seen before. The Vashkor scientists dismissed it at first, just another anomaly in the endless void. But then the signal grew stronger, and soon the entire galaxy knew its origin. A new species had emerged, one that had remained hidden for centuries: the humans. At first, there was no panic. The Vashkor had seen new species rise before, and they had always been easily brought to heel. The Council of Dominion, the ruling body of the Empire, barely gave the discovery a second thought. Some minor scouting fleets were sent to investigate, but none returned. Their signals vanished into the blackness of space as if they had never existed. This was unusual, but not alarming. The Vashkor believed it was a technical failure, or perhaps the work of some unknown spatial phenomenon. Still, they sent more ships, stronger ones. Yet again, silence. The humans, it seemed, were not as insignificant as they first appeared. For the rest of the galaxy, the news was met with curiosity. The smaller species, long crushed under Vashkor rule, wondered if these newcomers might offer something different. But hope was a dangerous thing. The Vashkor had ruled for too long, and no one wanted to believe that a mere unknown species could change that. So, they waited and watched. Then came the first true encounter. It happened on a remote mining world, one controlled by the Vashkor, but populated by a mix of enslaved species. The workers had been sending distress signals for years, begging for help, knowing no one would come. No one ever had. But one day the sky above the colony darkened, and massive ships appeared, their hulls unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The humans had arrived. They made no grand speeches, no declarations of conquest. They simply observed, scanned the planet, and then did something unthinkable. They attacked the Vashkor forces without warning, their weapons cutting through enemy defenses like paper. The battle was over in minutes. For the first time in history, the Vashkor had lost not to rebellion, not to another great power, but to complete outsiders. The enslaved workers watched in stunned silence as their captors were either destroyed or fooled in terror. And then, the humans did something even more shocking. They did not claim the planet. They did not demand tribute or install themselves as rulers. Instead, they freed the workers, supplied them with food, medicine, and weapons, and then left, disappearing back into the void as quickly as they had come. The news spread faster than the Vashkor could contain it. The galaxy was in shock. Who were these humans? Why had they come? Why had they fought? And most importantly, why had they not stayed to rule? This was not how the galaxy worked. Power was everything. The strong crushed the weak and took what they wanted. No species had ever fought without demanding something in return. The humans were an anomaly, and the Vashkor did not tolerate anomalies. The Council of Dominion convened in an emergency session. The elders of the Empire were ancient, their bodies enhanced by technology and genetic modification to extend their rule. They had seen wars, rebellions, and the rise and fall of lesser species. But never had they faced a threat they did not understand. The High Commander of the Vashkor fleet stepped forward, his voice filled with confidence. "They are nothing," he declared. "We will send the might of our fleet. We will show them what it means to stand against the Vashkor." The council agreed. A fleet was assembled, larger than any that had been sent before. The humans would be crushed, erased from history before they could become a real problem. But as the fleet prepared for war, something else was happening. Across the galaxy, the oppressed species were listening. For centuries, they had lived in fear, believing that no one would ever come to save them. But now, for the first time, a new possibility was forming in their minds. If the humans could stand against the Vashkor and win, what else was possible? Whispers of rebellion began to spread. Old resistance groups, long thought dead, started reforming in secret. For the first time, the Empire felt something it had not felt in centuries: uncertainty. And then the humans struck again. This time, it was not a single colony. It was an entire sector under Vashkor control. Their ships appeared without warning, slipping past enemy defenses as if they knew exactly where to strike. They targeted communication hubs, supply lines, and key military installations. The Vashkor forces were overwhelmed, their strategic superiority useless against an enemy that fought with a precision and unpredictability they had never encountered before. Within days, the sector was lost. The Council of Dominion could no longer ignore the threat. The High Commander's confidence wavered as reports came in. The humans were not a primitive, insignificant race. They were something else entirely. Their technology was different, not more advanced, but adaptable. Their war tactics were unpredictable, not bound by the rigid, calculated strategies that the Vashkor had relied on for generations. And worst of all, they did not fight for power. They fought because they chose to. The final report sent shivers through the council. It was a simple message, intercepted from a human transmission. It was not a threat, nor a demand. It was a statement. We do not seek war, but if you come for us, we will not run. The Vashkor had ruled with fear, but now, for the first time, they were the ones who had to wonder. Had they just awakened something far worse than rebellion? Had they, in their arrogance, called forth an enemy unlike any the galaxy had ever seen? The war was coming, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Vashkor fleet moved with terrifying precision, their warships gliding through the void like silent predators. They had spent centuries perfecting the art of dominance, crushing rebellions before they could take root, annihilating any species that dared to resist. To them, the humans were no different. A nuisance, a mistake that needed to be corrected. The fleet that had been assembled to hunt them down was massive. Hundreds of warships, each capable of wiping out entire planets. They expected an easy victory, a swift reminder to the galaxy that no one defied the Vashkor and lived. But the humans were not waiting to be hunted. They had already begun moving, striking key supply lines, disabling long-range communication relays, and disrupting the flow of Vashkor forces before they could even reach the battlefield. It was as if the humans knew exactly how the Vashkor operated, predicting their every move. The fleet was still advancing, but the smooth, unstoppable march of conquest was no longer so certain. And then the battle began. It happened at the edge of a contested system, where a human fleet intercepted the Vashkor Armada. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. The Vashkor had always fought with overwhelming force, their warships massive, heavily armed, and built to endure prolonged sieges. But the humans did not fight like any known civilization. Their ships were smaller, faster, their movements erratic and unpredictable. They did not form rigid battle lines, did not engage in direct head-on confrontations. Instead, they struck like ghosts, weaving through the battlefield, appearing where they should not have been, their weapons targeting critical weak points with devastating accuracy. Vashkor warships exploded in rapid succession, their defenses struggling to keep up with the sheer chaos of the human assault. For every human vessel that fell, 10 Vashkor ships were destroyed. The battle, meant to be a swift extermination of the human threat, turned into a disaster for the Empire. The Vashkor commanders, so used to absolute control, found themselves overwhelmed, their carefully crafted strategies crumbling in the face of an enemy that refused to fight by their rules. And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the human fleet vanished, retreating into deep space before the Vashkor could regroup. The battlefield was littered with wreckage, the remnants of what was supposed to be an easy victory. The Vashkor had won battles before, but never like this. Never at such a cost. And worst of all, they had no idea where the humans would strike next. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The impossible had happened again. The Vashkor had been defeated. Not once, not twice, but now in open war. The smaller, oppressed species whispered in the shadows, daring to imagine a future without the Empire's rule. Resistance groups that had long been silent began to stir, watching, waiting. The humans had not spoken to them, had not asked for allies, had not demanded loyalty. But they had given the galaxy something far more powerful than words. They had given them proof. Proof that the Vashkor could be fought. Proof that the old order was not as unshakable as it seemed. And for the first time, the Empire felt something it had never known before. Fear. The Council of Dominion, shaken by the loss, convened in secrecy. The High Commander, his once unbreakable confidence now laced with uncertainty, addressed the gathering. "We underestimated them," he admitted, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "But they are still only one species. We will regroup. We will not allow this insult to stand." But the council members were no longer so certain. The humans had not just fought back. They had fought with a purpose that no one could understand. They did not seek conquest. They did not behave like an empire. And yet, they fought harder than any force the galaxy had ever seen. It was as if they were not just fighting for themselves, but for something greater. And that terrified the Vashkor more than anything else, because fear was what had kept the galaxy in check for so long. Fear of the Empire's power, fear of the consequences of defiance. But what if there was a species that did not fear them at all? What if the humans had nothing to lose? And what if others, those who had long suffered in silence, began to believe the same? The war had only just begun, but already the balance of power had begun to shift, and the Vashkor were no longer so certain of their place at the top. The galaxy trembled under the weight of uncertainty, a feeling long forgotten in the shadow of the Vashkor Empire. Their rule had been absolute, their dominance unquestioned, and their strength unmatched for centuries. But now, a new force had emerged, one that defied all expectations. Humanity had not just resisted the Vashkor. They had humiliated them on the battlefield, proving that the invincible empire was not so invincible after all. The defeated fleet limped back to Vashkor-controlled space, their warships damaged, their pride shattered, their high commander forced to explain how an unknown species had not only survived, but had dealt them a devastating blow. Across the empire, whispers of doubt spread among the ruling class. Some refused to believe it, convinced that the humans had only been lucky, that their victory was a fluke. Others were not so sure. There was something different about this species, something dangerous. Unlike the Vashkor, who relied on predictable strategies and overwhelming force, the humans fought with adaptability, with a ruthlessness that had never been seen before in an enemy. And worse, they fought for something other than conquest. No one could understand their motives. They took no territory. They demanded no tribute. They did not behave like an empire seeking power, yet they wielded it with terrifying efficiency. They were unpredictable, and unpredictability was something the Vashkor feared. The Council of Dominion, desperate to reassert control, ordered an immediate response. A new fleet, larger and stronger, was assembled, not just to fight the humans, but to destroy them completely. Their homeworld had been located, Earth, a planet on the outskirts of the known galaxy, isolated, seemingly insignificant. The Council saw an opportunity to end the war before it could escalate further. They would not engage the humans in open battle again. Instead, they would strike at the heart of their civilization. A full invasion was planned. Earth would burn, and humanity would be erased before they could become a real threat. But humanity was not waiting to be attacked. As the Vashkor fleet mobilized, preparing for its assault, Human warships moved through the darkness of space, striking deep within enemy-controlled systems. Supply depots vanished in fiery explosions. Military convoys were ambushed and annihilated. Communication hubs were infiltrated and destroyed. Every move the Vashkor made was countered before it could be executed, as if humanity already knew their plans before they had even begun. Panic spread through the Empire. The High Commander, once confident of an easy victory, now found himself chasing shadows, unable to predict where the humans would strike next. The situation grew even worse when resistance movements, once weak and scattered, began rising across the galaxy. The humans had never spoken to these oppressed species, never reached out for alliances, but their actions had spoken louder than any words ever could. The Vashkor were not invincible. They could be fought. And now, for the first time, others were willing to take that risk. Across dozens of planets, small uprisings ignited, minor at first, but growing in strength as the news of human victory spread. The Council of Dominion, once so sure of its power, now faced a war on multiple fronts. It was no longer just about defeating humanity. It was about maintaining their rule over the galaxy. And it was slipping through their fingers. The humans, however, remained a mystery. They did not speak in grand declarations. They did not claim to be saviors. They fought. They won. And then they disappeared. It was as if they had no interest in ruling at all. And yet, with every battle, they were reshaping the balance of power in ways no one had expected. The war had changed from a simple act of extermination into something far greater. It was no longer just about humanity versus the Vashkor. It was about the future of the entire galaxy. And for the first time in millennia, the Empire was no longer certain of its victory. The Vashkor Empire, once the unchallenged ruler of the galaxy, now found itself facing an enemy unlike any it had encountered before. Humanity was not just another species to be conquered. They were a force of nature, moving through the darkness of space like a phantom, striking where they were least expected, and disappearing before retaliation could even begin. The war, which the Council of Dominion had once believed would end swiftly with humanity's annihilation, had now stretched into something far more dangerous, something they could no longer control. The Second Fleet sent to destroy the humans had suffered the same fate as the first. It had been a disaster, with entire warships reduced to burning wreckage. Their mighty weapons useless against an enemy that did not fight by the rules of war, the Vashkor had come to understand. The High Commander had no choice but to admit the truth. This was no longer a simple military conflict. This was something else, something unpredictable, and for the first time in history, the Vashkor did not know what to do. Fear began to creep into the Empire's core. The once enslaved species, who had lived in terror under Vashkor rule, were no longer silent. Revolts erupted across multiple star systems, inspired by humanity's defiance. The humans had never once called for an uprising, had never declared themselves as liberators, yet their actions had sparked a fire that the Vashkor could not contain. It was a war on two fronts now, one against the humans, and another against the very people the Empire had subjugated for centuries. And worse, the humans had never fought alone, even if they had never officially claimed allies. Every rebellion that weakened the Empire worked in humanity's favor. Every Vashkor warship that had to be redirected to suppress an uprising was one less ship they could send against Earth's growing armada. The balance of power, once so heavily tilted in the Empire's favor, was beginning to shift, and the Council of Dominion was running out of time to stop it. Desperation led them to change their strategy. If humanity could not be crushed through brute force, then they would strike where it hurt the most: Earth. The homeworld of this relentless enemy, the place from which their strength and technology originated. The Vashkor believed that if they could wipe out the human race at its source, this war would finally end. Plans were made in secret, and an invasion fleet was prepared, larger than any the Empire had ever sent before. The order was given. Earth was to be destroyed completely. No survivors, no mercy. But once again, the humans were not waiting to be attacked. Before the fleet could even leave the Empire's core systems, something unimaginable happened. The humans struck first. In a coordinated assault that no one had foreseen, human warships launched an all-out offensive on the very heart of the Vashkor Empire. They bypassed the outer defenses, slipping past security measures as if they had been studying them for years. Major command centers fell in a matter of hours, orbital defense platforms were sabotaged from within, and entire planets that had once been the backbone of the Empire found themselves cut off from communication. The humans had taken the fight directly to the rulers of the galaxy, and there was nothing the Vashkor could do to stop them. The Council of Dominion, once so sure of its power, now found itself trapped in its own fortress, its fleet scattered, its armies stretched too thin to respond. And then, the final message came. A human transmission, broadcast across the entire Empire for all to hear. It was not a declaration of war. It was not a demand for surrender. It was a single, simple statement. The time of rulers has ended. You will answer for what you have done. The Vashkor had always believed that they would rule forever, that no species could ever challenge their dominance, that no force in the universe could ever make them feel fear. But as the stars themselves seemed to burn with the fire of rebellion, as their fleets crumbled and their empire teetered on the edge of collapse, the Vashkor realized the truth. They had never been fighting to destroy humanity. They had been fighting to survive humanity. And they were losing. The once mighty Vashkor Empire was unraveling, its foundations cracking under the weight of a war it had never expected to lose. What had begun as a simple extermination mission had turned into a nightmare of endless defeats, a war that had spiraled out of their control. Humanity had struck at their very core, shattering their illusion of invincibility and exposing the weakness beneath their arrogance. The Empire, which had once ruled the galaxy with an iron grip, was now struggling to maintain even the illusion of power. Entire fleets had been lost. Planets that had been under Vashkor control for centuries had fallen into chaos, and uprisings had spread like wildfire, fueled by the hope that humanity's defiance had given them. The Council of Dominion had no choice but to acknowledge the truth. This war was no longer about crushing an insignificant species. It was about survival. Desperation led them to a final, reckless decision. If they could not destroy humanity with brute force, they would attempt something far more dangerous. A direct assault on Earth had already been planned, but now the Council sought to go even further. They would not just destroy Earth, they would make an example of it. The plan was simple. They would unleash a planet-killer weapon, an ancient doomsday device long kept in secret, capable of reducing an entire world to ash. If the humans saw their home burn, perhaps they would finally break. Perhaps the rest of the galaxy would see that defiance led only to annihilation. The Empire had never needed such drastic measures before, but now they saw no other choice. And so, the weapon was prepared. The last fleet of the Vashkor assembled, and the final attack was set in motion. But just as before, the humans were not waiting. They struck first, as if they had seen the Empire's desperation coming before the Vashkor themselves had even realized it. Before the fleet could launch, a human strike force infiltrated the Empire's most secure stronghold, where the doomsday weapon was kept. The attack was unlike anything the Vashkor had ever faced. Not a full-scale battle, but a surgical, precise strike that cut through their defenses with terrifying efficiency. By the time the Vashkor realized what was happening, it was already too late. The humans had not come to steal the weapon. They had come to destroy it. In a massive explosion that lit up the void of space, the last hope of the Vashkor was erased in fire and debris. The final weapon of their empire, the one thing they had believed could turn the tide of war, was gone. And with it, any remaining hope of victory. The Council of Dominion fell into chaos. Their fleets were broken, their armies scattered, their greatest weapon destroyed before it could ever be used. But the most terrifying realization was not just that they had lost the war. It was that humanity had never been fighting for mere survival. The Vashkor had believed this war was about dominance, about proving strength, about crushing those who opposed them. But the humans had fought with a different purpose, one the Empire had never understood until now. Humanity did not fight for power. They fought for justice, and justice had finally come for the Vashkor. Across the galaxy, the Empire's grip collapsed. More and more planets rose in rebellion, inspired by the final, undeniable proof that the Vashkor were no longer unstoppable. The name of humanity became a symbol of resistance, of hope, of a future where no species would ever again be ruled by fear. The Council of Dominion, once the supreme rulers of the galaxy, were now nothing more than relics of a dying empire, their fate sealed by the very species they had once dismissed as insignificant. And as the last Vashkor strongholds crumbled, as the final battles were fought, one truth became clear. The war was over. Humanity had not just survived. They had changed the galaxy forever. The collapse of the Vashkor Empire was no longer a possibility. It was an undeniable reality. Their fleets had been shattered, their armies reduced to scattered remnants fighting battles they could no longer hope to win. The Council of Dominion, once feared across the galaxy, had been driven into hiding, their desperate attempts to cling to power proving futile as rebellion spread across every world they had once ruled with an iron fist. What had begun as a war against humanity had spiraled into something far greater, something the Vashkor had never anticipated. They had always believed in their own supremacy, convinced that their rule would last forever. But now, they were witnessing the end of their own era, brought about by the very species they had dismissed as insignificant. Humanity had not just survived the war. They had led the charge in dismantling an empire that had enslaved countless worlds for centuries. Yet, despite their overwhelming victories, the humans did not behave like conquerors. They did not claim the fallen territories for themselves, did not install their own rule over the defeated Vashkor systems. Instead, they continued to do what had confused the Empire from the very beginning. They fought not for power, but for freedom. With every battle they won, they did not impose control, but instead encouraged the newly liberated species to decide their own fates. This was something the Vashkor could never understand. The Empire had existed for millennia on the belief that all power must be centralized, that order could only exist under their rule. But the humans had proven that another way was possible, a way in which no single force controlled the destiny of an entire galaxy. This was why the Empire had truly lost, not just because they had been defeated in battle, but because their very ideology had been shattered. And yet, even in their final moments, the Vashkor refused to surrender. Some of their highest-ranking leaders attempted to rally what was left of their forces, hoping for one last battle, one final attempt to reclaim what had been lost. A fleet was assembled, small and broken compared to the mighty armadas they had once commanded, but still powerful enough to cause devastation if left unchecked. Their target was not Earth this time. It was not even the human fleet. Instead, they aimed to strike at the very worlds that had dared to rebel, to make an example of those who had risen against them. If they could not rule, then they would burn the galaxy down with them. But the humans had anticipated this. Even before the remnants of the Vashkor could launch their attack, they were met in open space by the combined might of humanity's warships and the fleets of the newly freed worlds. This was no longer just humanity's war. It was a war of all those who had suffered under Vashkor rule, all those who had once believed they could never be free. And in this final battle, the last remnants of the Empire were crushed completely. The remaining Vashkor warships fought with the desperation of a species that knew it was facing extinction, but it was not enough. Their weapons, once feared across the stars, now failed to break the unity of the forces that stood against them. Their strategies, once flawless, were now outmatched by the unpredictable and relentless tactics of their enemies. And in the end, the last fleet of the Vashkor was erased from existence, their final act of defiance turning into nothing more than a forgotten whisper in the vastness of space. The war was truly over now. The Vashkor, once the masters of the galaxy, were no more. Their empire, which had once stretched across countless worlds, was now nothing but ruins and memories. And the species that had once feared them now stood together, free for the first time in generations. As the last battle ended, the humans did not celebrate with the arrogance of victors. They did not claim ownership over the galaxy they had helped to liberate. Instead, they simply watched as the once enslaved worlds began to rebuild, choosing their own paths for the first time. Humanity had fought with a purpose far greater than conquest. They had fought so that no one would ever have to live under the rule of fear again. And in doing so, they had changed the destiny of the galaxy forever. With the final defeat of the Vashkor, the galaxy found itself in a state of uncertain freedom. For centuries, fear had governed countless civilizations, shaping their lives under the shadow of an empire that had seemed eternal. But now, that shadow had been erased, and in its place, an unfamiliar light had emerged, the light of choice. For the first time, entire planets were left to decide their own futures, unbound by the chains of a tyrannical regime. Yet freedom did not come without challenges. The Vashkor had ruled with absolute control, their bureaucracies and military forces ensuring stability through oppression. Now, with that control shattered, chaos threatened to rise in its place. Some planets struggled with internal conflicts, long-standing rivalries that had been buried under the weight of the Empire's rule now resurfacing with violent force. Others, having been stripped of resources for generations, found themselves struggling to survive, unsure of how to rebuild from the ruins of servitude. It was in this fragile, uncertain moment that humanity's true role became clear. They had not come to the stars seeking dominion. They had not fought this war for conquest or power. But they had fought, and they had won, and now the responsibility of that victory weighed upon them. Many had expected the humans to claim the former Vashkor worlds as their own, to establish a new empire in the wake of the one they had destroyed. Instead, they did something no one could have predicted. They helped. Without demands, without conditions, humanity extended a hand to the fractured civilizations, offering aid where it was needed, sharing technology, sending fleets not as conquerors, but as protectors. They helped rebuild cities that had been destroyed by war. They provided food and medical supplies to those who had suffered under Vashkor rule. They mediated disputes between species that had been forced into conflict for centuries. They worked not as rulers, but as equals, asking nothing in return. And for the first time, the galaxy saw something it had never seen before, a power that did not seek to dominate, but to uplift. This was what made humanity truly terrifying to those who had once feared them. It was not their strength in battle, nor their superior tactics, nor even their relentless will to fight. It was their refusal to become what the Vashkor had been. They had every opportunity to take control, to shape the galaxy in their own image, to rule over those who had once been oppressed. But they did not. Instead, they gave power back to those who had never had it before. They made themselves something far more dangerous than an empire. They became an idea that no force, no fleet, no ruler could ever hope to destroy. The last remnants of the Vashkor, scattered and broken, watched in horror as the galaxy embraced this new reality. They had believed that the fall of their empire would lead to chaos, that without their rule, the civilizations they had dominated would collapse. But the opposite had happened. Unity had emerged where division had once been. Cooperation had taken the place of fear, and it was all because of humanity, the species that had come from the edges of the known galaxy, that had been dismissed as insignificant, that had refused to kneel to the so-called masters of the stars. The last surviving members of the Vashkor Council, now fugitives hunted by their own former subjects, realized the terrible truth too late. They had not just lost a war, they had lost the future. The galaxy was no longer theirs to rule. It belonged to those who had once been powerless, those who had once been afraid, those who had now been given the chance to rise. And at the heart of it all, standing not as conquerors, but as guardians, were the humans, the force that had reshaped the destiny of the stars, not with oppression, but with the one thing the Vashkor had never understood: hope. As the dust of war settled across the galaxy, a new era began, one not ruled by the iron fist of an empire, but by the uncertain steps of countless civilizations finally free to shape their own destinies. The Vashkor, once the supreme rulers of the stars, were no more. Their fleets were gone, their worlds reclaimed by those they had once oppressed, and their name, once spoken with fear, now whispered only as a reminder of a past that would never be repeated. Scattered remnants of the empire still existed, warlords clinging to the last shreds of power in hidden corners of space, but they were no longer a threat. The galaxy had changed, and there was no place left for them in it. Yet in this moment of victory, humanity did something even more extraordinary than winning the war. They stepped back. The Armada that had brought the Vashkor to their knees did not stay to claim territories, did not demand tribute, did not impose new rulers. Instead, the humans withdrew, allowing the newly freed species to take control of their own futures. They left behind knowledge, technology, and guidance when asked, but they did not dictate the path forward. They had fought not for dominion, but for justice, and now that justice had been served, they sought no reward. Many could not understand this. No species had ever held such power and willingly let it go. The galaxy had seen warlords rise from the ashes of fallen empires, conquerors who spoke of peace but ruled with hidden chains. But humanity was different. They had seen the horrors of tyranny, had fought wars against their own oppressors before they had ever reached the stars, and they had learned from it. Power, unchecked and absolute, was a poison that no species should wield. And so, they ensured that no one, not even themselves, would become what the Vashkor had been. In the years that followed, the galaxy reshaped itself. New alliances formed, old rivalries healed, and civilizations that had once been shackled by fear now stood as equals. The echoes of the Vashkor's rule would never fully fade, but they would serve as a lesson, a warning of what could happen if power was left in the hands of those who believed they were above all others. And in the center of it all, humanity remained, not as rulers, but as a presence that could not be ignored. They had proven that strength was not in the ability to conquer, but in the ability to resist corruption. They had shown that true power did not come from domination, but from the will to fight for something greater than oneself. They had become more than a species. They had become a symbol. Across the stars, their name was spoken with awe, with gratitude, with wonder. To some, they were legends. To others, they were saviors. But to those who had seen them fight, who had watched them refuse to bend, even in the face of a seemingly unstoppable empire, they were something far more terrifying. They were the ones who had changed everything. The galaxy had once thought itself alone in the dark, but then humanity arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again.